Story number 1. The encounter at Mount Baker. Mount Baker has always been a place of pristine beauty, a sanctuary where the wildness of nature collides with the serenity of snow-covered peaks. For years, my girlfriend, Rachel, and I sought refuge there from the monotony of city life, finding solace in its vastness and solitude. But on one fateful hike, our love for the wilderness was tested by something far beyond the realm of the natural. It was late November, the first heavy snowfall of the season blanketing the mountain trails. The air was sharp and invigorating, each breath filling our lungs with the unmistakable scent of pine and frost. Rachel and I had planned this hike for months, eager to escape the world and immerse ourselves in the untouched beauty of Mount Baker. We started early, the sun casting a golden glow over the snowy expanse as it peeked over the horizon. The trail was quiet, the only sounds our boots crunching on the snow and the occasional chirp of a bird. We talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing as effortlessly as the streams we crossed. About 3 hours into our hike, we decided to take a break near a ridge that overlooked a frozen lake. The view was breathtaking, the crystalline surface of the lake reflecting the towering peaks that surrounded it, the sky a deep azure. We sat in silence, absorbing the moment, until a sound shattered the tranquility. It was a low, guttural howl, resonating through the valley with an intensity that made my skin crawl. It wasn't like anything I'd heard before. Not a wolf, not the wind, but something primal and menacing. Rachel froze, her wide eyes locking onto mine. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I shook my head, my pulse quickening. "I don't know. Maybe an animal. Let's stay calm." The howling came again, louder this time, closer. It echoed off the mountains, creating an unsettling symphony that seemed to envelop us. Against my better judgment, I decided to investigate, curiosity battling with the creeping sense of dread. Rachel reluctantly followed, her hand clutching mine tightly. As we approached the source of the sound, the air grew colder, the forest eerily silent save for the crunch of our boots on the snow. The trees became denser, their gnarled branches forming a canopy that blocked out the weak sunlight. My breath fogged in the frigid air, and I could feel Rachel's grip tighten with each step. Then we saw it. In a small clearing, partially obscured by the shadows of the towering evergreens, stood a massive figure. It was covered in thick, matted fur that glistened with frost, its hunched frame exuding an unnatural strength. It was dragging a tree trunk through the snow, its sheer size making the task seem effortless. The creature's head was low, its broad shoulders heaving with exertion as it moved with a deliberate, almost methodical rhythm. We stood frozen, too terrified to move or make a sound. The creature suddenly stopped, its head snapping up as if sensing our presence. Slowly, turned to face us, revealing a face that was both alien and familiar, a grotesque fusion of primal features and human-like intelligence. Its eyes glowed an eerie yellow, piercing through the shadows and locking onto ours. For a moment, time stood still. The world seemed to shrink, the only reality the gaze of that monstrous being. Then, without warning, it let out a deafening roar, a sound so guttural and primal that it reverberated through my very bones. "Run," I managed to whisper, grabbing Rachel's hand and pulling her back the way we came. We sprinted through the forest, the trees blurring as adrenaline took over. Behind us, the creature's heavy footsteps thundered through the snow, a relentless pursuit that seemed to close the distance with every step. Branches whipped against our faces, and the cold air burned our lungs. But we didn't stop, driven by sheer terror. When we finally reached the ridge where we had stopped earlier, the footsteps ceased. I turned, expecting to see the creature emerging from the trees. But there was nothing, only the silent expanse of the snow-covered forest. Rachel collapsed onto the ground, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. "Did it stop?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I nodded, though I wasn't convinced. The oppressive feeling of being watched lingered, a sensation that sent shivers down my spine despite the freezing temperature. "Let's get back to the car," I said, helping her to her feet. The hike back was torturous. Every snap of a branch, every gust of wind sent waves of panic through us. The forest, once a place of beauty and solace, now felt alive with unseen eyes. The sense of being hunted was inescapable, a heavy presence that loomed over us like a storm cloud. When we finally reached the trailhead, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out towards us. Our car was the only vehicle in the lot, its presence a small beacon of safety in an otherwise hostile environment. We climbed in, locking the doors and sitting in silence for a moment, our breaths visible in the cold air. As I started the engine, Rachel looked out the window, her face pale. "It's still watching us," she whispered. I followed her gaze, my heart sinking as I saw the creature standing at the edge of the forest, partially hidden among the trees. Its glowing eyes burned like twin beacons in the darkness, fixed on us with an intensity that made my stomach churn. I slammed the car into gear and sped down the road, the tires skidding slightly on the icy pavement. The drive back to civilization was a blur, the weight of the encounter pressing down on us. Even after we reached the safety of our apartment, the fear lingered, a shadow that refused to lift. Rachel couldn't sleep, her dreams plagued by visions of the creature's yellow eyes and guttural roars. I spent hours researching local legends, desperate for an explanation. What I found only deepened the mystery. Tales of a hulking, fur-covered being known as the Watcher of Baker had circulated among locals for decades. Some claimed it was a guardian spirit, protecting the forest from intruders. Others believed it was a malevolent entity, preying on those who ventured too deep into its territory. But one detail was consistent across all accounts. Once you encountered the Watcher, it never truly left you. Months passed, but the memories of that day never faded. Rachel and I avoided the mountains, opting instead for the safety of crowded parks and familiar trails. Yet, the feeling of being watched persisted, a constant reminder of the eyes that had followed us through the forest. One evening, as I was walking home from work, I felt it again, that oppressive presence, the weight of unseen eyes. I turned, expecting to see the familiar glow of yellow eyes in the shadows. But there was nothing, only the quiet hum of the city and the distant sound of traffic. I knew then that the Watcher was still with us, its gaze a silent reminder of the boundaries we had crossed and the wildness we had dared to confront. Mount Baker remained a place of beauty and terror, its towering peaks hiding secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. If you ever find yourself hiking through the forests of Mount Baker, remember our story, respect the land, tread lightly, and never venture too far into the unknown. For the Watcher of Baker still roams the woods, its yellow eyes burning with an ancient, otherworldly fire, always observing, always waiting, and once it has seen you, it never forgets. Story number 2. The Night Hunter of Gifford Pinchot. Driving through the dense expanse of Gifford Pinchot National Forest has always been a solitary experience for me. As a long-haul trucker, my life revolves around the endless highways that slice through America's most remote landscapes. The quiet solitude of the forest, the towering pines dusted with snow, and the rhythmic hum of my engine provide a sense of peace that contrasts sharply with the chaos of city life. But one winter night, that peace was shattered by an encounter that still haunts my dreams. It was December, the cold biting into my bones despite the layers of thermal wear. I had been delivering supplies to a remote logging camp nestled deep within the forest. The roads were slick with ice, and visibility was poor, swallowed by the heavy snowfall that had begun late the previous night. My headlights barely penetrated the thick white blanket, making every mile a cautious endeavor. As midnight approached, I found myself navigating a particularly narrow stretch of Route 530, a seldom used path that snaked through the heart of the forest. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of branches weighed down by snow and the distant call of an owl. My thoughts drifted to my family. The warmth of home, a stark contrast to the frigid wilderness surrounding me. That's when I saw it. A massive shape stood at the edge of the road, partially obscured by the falling snow. At first glance, I thought it was an animal, perhaps a moose or a bear. But as I drew closer, the contours became unnervingly humanoid. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowed the truck to a crawl, the headlights revealing more of the figure's imposing stature. It was tall, easily over 7 feet, with broad shoulders and limbs that seemed too long for any known creature. But what stopped me cold were its eyes, glowing a fierce, unnatural red that pierced through the darkness like 2 burning embers. They fixed me with an intensity that made my skin crawl, a silent challenge hanging in the frigid air. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding slightly on the icy pavement. The figure took a step forward, the snow crunching underfoot, but it didn't move towards me. Instead, it stood motionless, its gaze unwavering. The wind howled around us, the only sound the tense silence that now enveloped the scene, summoning every ounce of courage. I rolled down the window, the cold air biting at my face. "Do you need a ride?" I called out, my voice wavering despite my attempts to keep it steady. There was no response, only the deep, resonant growl that emanated from the creature's throat. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Where are you going?" I asked, my eyes never leaving those haunting red orbs. The creature tilted its head slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed both curiosity and sorrow. "Nowhere," it replied, its voice a guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air. Confusion mixed with fear. "Then why are you here? What do you want?" Before I could utter another word, the creature turned away, its massive form moving with an eerie grace towards a nearby snow fence. Without warning, it leapt over the barrier effortlessly, the snow dispersing in a cloud of white as it vanished into the darkness as quickly as it had appeared. I sat frozen, the adrenaline coursing through my veins making it hard to breathe. Slowly, I realized I was alone, the only evidence of the encounter the lingering chill and the deep impressions it had left in the snow. Shaking, I started the engine and continued my journey, the image of those red eyes seared into my memory. The rest of the night passed in a blur, the encounter replaying in my mind like a twisted nightmare. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the sense that something or someone was lurking just beyond the reach of my headlights. Every rustle in the trees, every distant howl, sent shivers down my spine, making it impossible to relax. By morning, I had reached the logging camp, the early sunlight offering a semblance of normalcy. As I unloaded the supplies, I couldn't help but glance towards the direction where the creature had vanished, half expecting to see it standing there once more. But the road was clear, the forest serene in the new day's light. Determined to make sense of what I had seen, I approached the camp's foreman, a grizzled man named Hank who had been in the business for decades. "Hank, did you see anything strange last night? A big creature, maybe?" I asked, trying to mask my lingering fear. Hank's eyes widened in recognition. "You saw the night hunter," he said gravely. "Not many have. It's a legend around here, said to be the spirit of a man who lost his life in a terrible accident on these roads years ago. They say his restless spirit hunts the forest, searching for something he can't find." I felt a chill despite the warmth of the morning sun. "What do you think it wants?" Hank shook his head. "No one really knows. Some say it's looking for justice. Others believe it's simply lost, wandering these woods for eternity. All I know is, you don't want to cross paths with it again." The night's encounter weighed heavily on me as I drove back home, the landscape now bathed in the soft light of dawn. I couldn't stop thinking about the night hunter, its red eyes a constant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Weeks turned into months, but the memory never faded. I became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the legend, digging into old records and speaking with locals who had their own tales of the night hunter. Each story added another layer to the mystery, painting a picture of a man tormented by his past, his spirit forever bound to the forest he once called home. One chilly autumn evening, I decided to return to Gifford Pinchot, driven by a need to confront the unknown. Armed with a camera, a notebook, and a renewed sense of purpose, I ventured back onto Route 530, retracing my steps to the very spot where I had first encountered the night hunter. As night fell and the temperature plummeted, the forest transformed into a shadowy maze, the trees looming like silent sentinels. I set up a small camp near the snow fence, the same barrier that had witnessed the creature's elusive departure. The air was thick with anticipation, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence. Hours passed with nothing but the sound of my own breathing and the distant howl of the wind. Just as I was beginning to question my decision, a faint noise reached my ears, the same heavy footsteps from that night. My heart raced as I grabbed my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. There it is, I whispered to myself, watching as the silhouette of the night hunter emerged from the shadows once more. Its red eyes glowed ominously, the same sorrowful yet menacing gaze that had left me paralyzed weeks ago. This time, however, I was prepared. I stepped out of my truck, holding up my camera in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to harm you," I called out, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. "I want to understand." The creature paused, its gaze locked onto mine. Slowly, it approached, the snow crunching under its massive feet. As it drew nearer, I noticed the details, deep lines etched into its face, eyes that seemed to hold centuries of pain, and an aura of sorrow that enveloped its form. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The night hunter stopped just a few feet away, its red eyes flickering with an emotion that bordered on despair. "I lost something," it replied, its voice echoing in my mind. "Something I can't find. Something that ties me to this world." I felt a pang of empathy, the weight of its eternal search pressing down on me. "Maybe I can help." "What did you lose?" It looked away, the night sky reflecting in its eyes. "Hope, a chance to make things right. But I'm trapped here, forever wandering these woods, unable to move on." Determined to aid the restless spirit, I began to search for clues that might unravel the mystery of the night hunter. We spent hours together, me listening to its silent pleas, the forest around us a witness to our quest. Gradually, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Stories of a tragic accident, wrongful accusations, and a man whose spirit could not find peace until justice was served. As dawn broke, casting a golden light over the snow-covered landscape, I felt a shift in the air. The night hunter's presence seemed to soften, the red glow in its eyes dimming to a gentle warmth. "Thank you," it whispered, a sense of relief washing over it. "You've helped me find peace." With that, the creature began to fade, its form dissolving into the morning mist, leaving behind only the lingering sense of tranquility that had been absent for so long. I watched in awe as the night hunter vanished, a final act of gratitude marking the end of its eternal vigil. Driving away from Gifford Pinchot that morning, I felt a profound sense of closure. The legend of the night hunter was no longer a source of fear but a story of redemption and the enduring power of compassion. The roads through the forest remained as serene as ever, the haunting presence now a part of the mountain's silent history. Years have passed since that night, but the memory remains vivid, a testament to the thin line between the living and the dead, and the mysteries that lie within the heart of nature. Gifford Pinchot National Forest continues to be a place of beauty and solitude, its roads holding stories that wait to be discovered by those brave enough to seek them. If you ever find yourself driving through the dense woods of Gifford Pinchot on a cold winter night, remember the tale of the night hunter. Approach with respect and empathy, for the spirits that linger are not just figments of imagination but echoes of lives once lived, yearning to share their stories and find the peace they so desperately seek. Story number 3. Echoes at Spirit Lake. I've always been drawn to the serenity of lakes nestled within dense forests, their tranquil waters reflecting the untouched beauty of nature. Spirit Lake, with its crystal-clear surface and encircling pines, was the perfect escape from the chaos of everyday life. When my friends Tom, Sarah, Lisa, and Jake and I decided to spend a weekend camping there, we envisioned peaceful nights under star-studded skies and days filled with hiking and laughter. Little did we know, Spirit Lake held secrets far darker than any of us could imagine. We arrived on a crisp Friday afternoon, the sun casting a golden hue over the snow-capped peaks that framed the lake. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of pine and the distant sound of birdsong. Setting up our campsite was straightforward. We found a flat area near the water's edge, perfect for pitching tents and building a fire. As dusk approached, we gathered around the fire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows. The warmth of the flames a comforting contrast to the chill in the air. That night, the sky was a blanket of deep indigo, dotted with countless stars that seemed to twinkle with a life of their own. The lake mirrored the heavens, creating an illusion of infinite space. We settled into our tents, the sounds of the forest lulling us into a restless sleep. It wasn't until the witching hour that the tranquility was shattered. A faint rustling echoed through the trees, a sound that seemed out of place in the stillness of the night. Jake, ever the adventurous one, was the first to stir. "Did you guys hear that?" he whispered, his voice tinged with unease. Tom, our unofficial leader, responded first. "Probably just an animal. Don't worry about it." But the noise persisted, growing louder and more deliberate. It was a heavy, deliberate thudding, as if something large was moving through the forest. My heart pounded in my chest as I exchanged worried glances with Sarah and Lisa. "Maybe someone else is out here," Sarah suggested, her voice barely audible. We decided to investigate, grabbing our flashlights and cautiously stepping out of our tents. The cold night air bit at our skin, and the light from our torches cast long, eerie shadows among the trees. The sound seemed to be circling our campsite, making it impossible to determine its direction. As we moved closer to the source, the thudding grew more pronounced, synchronized with a low, guttural growl that sent chills down our spines. Suddenly, a massive silhouette emerged from the darkness, standing at the edge of the lake. It was humanoid but unnaturally tall and broad, covered in thick, matted fur that blended seamlessly with the surrounding wilderness. The creature's eyes glowed a sinister red, piercing through the night like two burning embers. We froze, unable to comprehend what we were seeing. The creature stood motionless, its gaze fixed intensely on us. Time seemed to stand still as we exchanged terrified glances, our minds racing with fear and disbelief. "What is that thing?" Jake managed to choke out, his voice shaking. Before anyone could respond, the creature let out a deafening roar, a sound that reverberated through the forest and made the very ground tremble beneath our feet. It began to move, each step causing the earth to shake, the snow beneath its feet crunching loudly. We turned to run, adrenaline propelling us forward as we sprinted back to our campsite, the creature in hot pursuit. Panic surged through me as we fumbled to pack up our gear, the sound of the creature's growls growing louder with each passing second. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees whipping in the wind as if trying to impede our escape. I could hear Tom's frantic breathing behind me, Sarah's terrified screams, and Jake's desperate calls for us to keep moving. We burst into the campsite, scattering in different directions, hoping to confuse whatever was chasing us. My legs burned as I ran towards the trailhead, the lake's dark waters reflecting the chaos unfolding around me. The creature was relentless, its red eyes burning with an unholy intensity, its growls echoing in my ears. Just as I thought I couldn't run any further, I stumbled onto the main trail, the path illuminated by the first light of dawn. Exhausted and terrified, I looked back to see the creature standing at the edge of the forest, watching us with those malevolent eyes. It let out one final roar before retreating into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Breathless and shaken, I made my way back to the campsite, where I found my friends huddled together, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. "We need to leave," Tom insisted, his voice shaky but determined. "Now." We packed up our gear in silence, the memory of that night etched into our minds. As we drove away from Spirit Lake, the sun rose fully, casting a warm glow over the serene landscape that now felt tainted by the horrors we had witnessed. The peaceful facade of the lake was forever marred by the presence of that monstrous figure, its haunting red eyes lingering in our nightmares. Back in civilization, our story was met with skepticism and disbelief. Friends and family listened in stunned silence, struggling to understand what we had experienced. Local authorities dismissed it as a shared hallucination brought on by the stress of the storm and isolation. But we knew the truth. Spirit Lake held a darkness that defied explanation, a malevolent force lurking beneath its tranquil surface. Determined to uncover the origins of the creature, I delved into local legends and historical records. I discovered tales of an ancient guardian spirit, a protector of the forest who had been corrupted by years of neglect and encroachment. According to the lore, the spirit had taken on a monstrous form, its red eyes symbolizing the blood it had shed in its anger and sorrow. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that what we had encountered was no ordinary animal, but a vengeful spirit bound to the land. I reached out to historians, spiritual leaders, and even paranormal experts, hoping to find a way to appease the creature and bring peace to Spirit Lake. But the answers were elusive, the darkness of the forest holding its secrets tightly. Years passed, but the memory of that night never faded. Every time I looked at a serene lake or heard the rustle of trees in the wind, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of fear and respect for the untamed wilderness. Spirit Lake remained a place of mystery, its calm waters concealing the horrors that lay beneath. One winter evening, driven by a need for closure, I returned to Spirit Lake with a sense of purpose. Armed with candles, offerings, and a deep respect for the land, I set up a small shrine by the lakeshore. "I'm sorry for intruding," I whispered into the cold night air. "Please, find peace." As the night grew colder, the wind picked up, and the forest seemed to come alive around me. The surface of the lake shimmered under the moonlight, and for a moment, I thought I saw the reflection of those glowing red eyes. But instead of fear, there was a profound sense of sadness and longing. The air grew still, and a soft, mournful melody filled the night, echoing through the trees. It was as if the forest itself was singing a lullaby to soothe the restless spirit. I sat in silence, feeling the weight of years of sorrow lift, replaced by a sense of calm and understanding. In that moment, I realized that the darkness we encountered was not just a manifestation of fear, but a plea for recognition and respect. Spirit Lake's guardian had been forgotten, its existence overshadowed by human progress and indifference. By acknowledging its presence and offering our respect, we had honored its legacy and helped it find the peace it so desperately sought. As I packed up to leave, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the serene landscape. The lake, once a place of haunting memories, now felt like a sanctuary, its waters reflecting the hope and healing that had been achieved. The legend of the red-eyed creature remained, but it was now a story of sorrow, respect, and the enduring power of nature's guardians. Driving away from Spirit Lake, I felt a profound sense of closure. The horrors of that night were now a part of my story, a testament to the mysteries that lie within the wilderness and the importance of honoring the spirits that protect them. Spirit Lake remained a place of beauty and darkness, a reminder that some places hold secrets better left undisturbed, their echoes lingering in the stillness of the night. If you ever find yourself near a serene lake surrounded by dense forests, remember the tale of Spirit Lake. Approach with respect and humility, for the guardians of these lands watch silently, their presence a reminder of the delicate balance between humanity and nature. The next time you hear a heavy thud or catch a glimpse of glowing eyes in the darkness, know that you are in the presence of something ancient and powerful, deserving of your respect and understanding. Story number 4. Footsteps in the snow at Snoqualmie Pass. I've always been drawn to the mountains, their towering peaks and untouched snow offering a sense of peace that city life sorely lacks. When my wife, Emily, and our 2 kids, Sarah and Jake, decided to spend a weekend snowboarding at Snoqualmie Pass, I welcomed the chance to escape our hectic routines and immerse ourselves in nature. Little did we know, the pass held secrets that would forever change our perception of the wilderness. We arrived on Friday afternoon, the sun beginning its descent behind the rugged skyline. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and the distant sound of rushing water. Our cabin, nestled on the edge of a dense forest, was perfect, a cozy refuge with large windows overlooking the pristine slopes. As we settled in, excitement buzzed through the house, the kids eager to hit the trails the next morning. Saturday dawned bright and clear, the snow glistening under the winter sun. We spent the day shredding the slopes, the exhilaration of carving through fresh powder making us feel invincible. As evening approached, we returned to the cabin, our bodies tired but our spirits high. We shared stories by the fireplace, the warmth and laughter creating a comforting bubble against the encroaching night. After dinner, we decided to take a short walk around the property, enjoying the tranquility of the snow-covered landscape. The sky was a deep indigo, dotted with stars that seemed to twinkle in the silence. As we walked, Jake, always the curious one, pointed out something unusual. "Look, Dad," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "There are footprints leading into the woods." I glanced down and saw it large, deep impressions in the snow that couldn't possibly belong to any of us. They were too big, too wide, and the spacing was off. Emily and Sarah exchanged worried looks, while Jake seemed fascinated. "Should we follow them?" Emily asked, her brow furrowed. I hesitated, a nagging unease settling in my stomach. "I don't know, guys. It might be best to stay close to the cabin." But curiosity got the better of us. We decided to follow the footprints, moving cautiously into the dense forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches heavy with snow, creating a tunnel of white that seemed to swallow us whole. The footprints led us deeper into the woods, the only sounds our crunching boots and the distant call of an owl. After about half an hour, the footprints stopped abruptly. We stood in a small clearing, the moonlight casting eerie shadows on the snow. That's when I felt it, a prickling sensation at the base of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I turned to look around, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. "Maybe it's an animal," I suggested, trying to sound reassuring. Emily nodded, though her eyes betrayed her fear. "Let's head back." As we turned to leave, Sarah gasped. "Look!" She pointed towards the edge of the clearing. There, standing just beyond the tree line, was a figure, tall and imposing. It was covered in what looked like thick, matted fur. Its eyes, however, were what sent chills down my spine. Glowing red, piercing through the darkness. We froze, the air growing colder, our breaths visible in the frigid night. The creature stood motionless, its gaze fixed on us with an intensity that felt almost sentient. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, the rest of the world fading away as fear took hold. "Should we run?" Jake whispered, clutching Emily's hand tightly. Before I could respond, the creature began to move, slow and deliberate steps crunching through the snow towards us. The red eyes never left mine, their malevolent glow sending waves of terror through my body. I grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her and the kids towards the cabin. "Move! Now!" I shouted, adrenaline surging as we sprinted back through the forest. The creature followed, its presence looming over us like a dark omen. Branches whipped against our faces, the snow blinding our vision, but we pushed forward, desperate to reach the safety of our cabin. We burst through the door, slamming it shut behind us, The creature stopped at the edge of the clearing, its red eyes staring through the window, a low growl rumbling from its throat. My heart raced as I realized the cabin was our only refuge. But how could we stay safe with something so terrifying just outside? Emily grabbed the phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. We saw something out there. It was huge, covered in fur, with glowing red eyes. Please, send help. The operator's voice was calm, but I could hear the doubt in her tone. Can you describe it? Any details that might help us identify it? I struggled to find the words, my mind blank with fear. It was not human. It was too big, too strong. And those eyes, they were glowing red. After hanging up, we sat in stunned silence. The only sounds our ragged breathing and the distant growl of the creature. Hours passed with no sign of help. The storm still raging outside. We huddled together, the warmth of the cabin doing little to quell the cold fear that had settled in our hearts. As midnight approached, the creature seemed to lose interest, his presence fading into the night. The red eyes blinked out one by one, the malevolent glow extinguishing until the woods were silent once more. Exhausted and traumatized, we fell into a restless sleep, the events of the night replaying in our minds. Sunday morning brought a sense of relief as the storm finally subsided. We cautiously opened the cabin door, the morning sun casting a hopeful light over the snow. The footprints had vanished, leaving no trace of the creature's existence. We packed up and left Snoqualmie Pass, the memory of that night etched into our souls. Back in the city, our story was met with skepticism. Friends and family listened in disbelief, unable to comprehend what we had encountered. The local authorities found no evidence of the creature, dismissing our tale as a product of our imagination fueled by isolation and fear. But we knew what we had seen, the glowing red eyes, the towering figure lurking in the woods, the deep footprints leading into the darkness. Months passed, but the fear never truly left us. Late at night, we'd hear noises outside our windows, the sound of heavy footsteps crunching through the snow, or the distant howl of the wind that seemed almost like a cry for help. The children spoke of shadows moving just beyond their vision, while Emily and I struggled with sleepless nights, our minds haunted by the encounter. One evening, years later, I found myself returning to Snoqualmie Pass, driven by a need to understand what had happened. Armed with better equipment and a newfound determination, I decided to explore the area where we had first discovered the footprints. The forest was silent, the snow untouched since that fateful night. As I trekked through the familiar trail, the memories flooded back, each step echoing the terror we had faced. The footprints were gone, just as we had left them, but the feeling of being watched was as strong as ever. I reached the clearing, standing in the spot where the creature had appeared. The air was cold, the silence oppressive, but there was a sense of closure I couldn't quite grasp. Suddenly, a soft growl broke the silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. My heart raced as I turned to see the creature once more, its red eyes burning with a haunting sorrow rather than malevolence. It stood there, not as a predator, but as a lost soul yearning for understanding. I took a deep breath, stepping forward slowly. "I'm sorry for what happened," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I want to help you find peace." The creature paused, its gaze meeting mine with an intensity that spoke of centuries of pain and longing. Then, as if understanding my intent, turned and began to walk away, the footprints leading back into the depths of the forest. I watched as it disappeared into the trees, a sense of calm washing over me. That night, I returned home with a sense of purpose, knowing that some mysteries are meant to be understood, not feared. The memory of the red-eyed creature at Snoqualmie Pass remains a testament to the unknown forces that dwell within nature, waiting to be acknowledged and respected. If you ever find yourself traversing the snowy trails of Snoqualmie Pass, remember our story. Approach the wilderness with respect and empathy, for the spirits that linger are not just figments of imagination but echoes of lives once lived, yearning to be heard and remembered. Story number 5. The Snowman on Cascade Peak. I've always been fascinated by the untamed beauty of the Cascade Range. The towering peaks, blanketed in pristine snow, hold a silent promise of adventure and solitude that calls to my soul. As an avid hiker and photographer, I sought to capture the essence of these majestic mountains, immersing myself in their serene yet formidable presence. But one winter expedition changed my perception of the wilderness forever, plunging me into a nightmare that still haunts my dreams. It was mid-January, the heart of winter, when I decided to tackle Cascade Peak, a notoriously challenging trail known for its unpredictable weather and treacherous conditions. Armed with my gear, tent, warm clothing, food supplies, and my trusty camera, I set out on a crisp morning. The sky a brilliant shade of blue contrasting sharply with the white expanse of snow-covered trees. The first few days of my hike were everything I had hoped for. The air was invigorating, filled with the scent of pine and the distant sound of rushing streams. I reveled in the solitude, the only company being the occasional deer or the vibrant flurry of a snowflake dancing in the breeze. Each night, I pitched my tent under the stars, the crackling fire providing warmth against the biting cold. On the fourth day, an unexpected snowstorm rolled in, catching me off guard. The sky darkened ominously, and the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it a flurry of icy snowflakes. Visibility dropped to nearly zero, turning the familiar trail into an indistinguishable maze of white. I knew I had to find shelter quickly before the storm intensified further. I stumbled through the relentless blizzard, my progress hampered by the deep snow and howling wind. Hours passed, each step a battle against the elements, my breath visible in the frigid air. Just as exhaustion began to take its toll, I saw a faint glimmer of light through the blinding snow. Relief surged through me, perhaps a ranger station or another hiker seeking refuge. As I approached, the figure of a snowman came into view. Oddly out of place in the swirling storm, it stood alone, meticulously crafted with coal eyes, carrot nose, and a scarf that fluttered in the gusts. But there was something unsettling about it. Its presence seemed almost sentient, as if it were watching me with a silent, unblinking gaze. I paused, staring at the snowman, feeling a strange compulsion to move closer. The storm raged around me, the snowflakes whipping against my face. Yet the snowman remained steadfast, untouched by the fury of the elements. A chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from an inexplicable sense of dread. Before I could decide what to do, a faint glow emanated from behind the snowman, revealing the entrance to a cave nestled in the mountainside. The light was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the bitter cold outside. With no other options and desperation mounting, I approached the cave, the snowman seemingly guiding my way. Inside, the cave was surprisingly spacious and warm, a stark difference from the icy blizzard outside. I set up my camp, grateful for the shelter and the respite from the storm. As I settled into my tent, the memory of the snowman lingered, an eerie reminder of the night's events. The next morning, the storm had subsided, leaving behind a tranquil silence that enveloped the mountain. I emerged from my tent, the air crisp and clear, the snow glistening under the bright sun. To my astonishment, the snowman was gone. No trace of its presence remained, as if it had vanished into thin air. Shaken but relieved, I continued my hike, retracing my steps back to the main trail. Hours later, I reached the trailhead, exhausted but triumphant. As I descended into the valley, I decided to share my experience with fellow hikers and park rangers, hoping to find some explanation for the mysterious snowman. However, my story was met with skepticism and disbelief. The rangers listened politely but couldn't offer any insights. "There's no snowman recorded on the trail," one of them said, shaking his head. "You must have imagined it after being caught in the storm." I tried to convince them of what I had seen, describing the detailed craftsmanship and the guiding presence of the snowman. But no one believed me. The locals whispered about the legend of a ghostly snowman that appeared during fierce storms, a guardian spirit lost in time, but most dismissed it as mere folklore, a story concocted to explain the unexplained. Determined to find the truth, I returned to the Cascade Range the following year, equipped with better equipment and a resolve to uncover the mystery. I spent days exploring the area where I had first encountered the snowman, documenting every inch of the trail, every hidden cave, and every sign of wildlife. But the snowman remained elusive, its presence only a fleeting memory in my mind. One night, during another harsh winter storm, I found myself once again battling the elements on Cascade Peak. The wind howled like a living beast, and the snow fell in relentless sheets, obscuring the path ahead. Exhausted and disoriented, I realized I had lost my way, the trail now a maze of indistinguishable white. Desperate for shelter, I stumbled upon a familiar sight, a meticulously crafted snowman, standing alone in the midst of the storm. My heart raced as I approached, the memory of last year's encounter flooding my mind. But this time, something felt different. The snowman seemed more imposing, its coal eyes glowing with an intensity that mirrored my own fear. Before I could react, a warm light emanated from behind the snowman, revealing the entrance to the cave. Without hesitation, I entered, the storm's fury muted within the cave's embrace. The interior was identical to last year's, spacious, warm, and strangely comforting. I set up my camp, the presence of the snowman a haunting reminder of the past. As I sat by the fire, the silence was broken by a faint whisper, barely audible over the crackling flames. "Help me." The voice seemed to echo, a sorrowful plea that resonated deep within me. I turned to the snowman, my eyes meeting its cold gaze. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The snowman remained silent, his presence almost sentient, as if it were waiting for me to understand. Suddenly, the cave walls began to shimmer, revealing visions of a tragic past. I saw a young woman, her face contorted in anguish, her life cut short by a brutal accident on Cascade Peak. Her spirit, unable to find peace, had manifested as the snowman, eternally guiding lost souls to safety in exchange for her own eternal unrest. Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the depth of her sorrow, the burden she carried. "What can I do to help you find peace?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The snowman's coal eyes softened, the red glow fading into a gentle warmth. "Remember us?" The voice echoed once more. "Promise of closure. Honor our stories, and let us go." I nodded, understanding the responsibility I now bore. I spent the rest of the night documenting the cave's interior, capturing the visions and the profound sorrow that filled the space. As dawn broke, the storm subsided, and the snowman's presence began to dissolve, the coal eyes dimming until only the soft glow of the candle remained. With a heavy heart and a sense of fulfillment, I left the cave, the snowman's spirit finally at peace. The following days were spent sharing my story with the rangers and local communities, the truth of the snowman's existence finally coming to light. The legend of the snowman on Cascade Peak transformed from mere folklore to a poignant reminder of the spirits that linger, yearning for remembrance and closure. Years have passed since that fateful night, and I often find myself returning to the Cascade Range, not as a hiker seeking adventure, but as a guardian of the stories that echo through the mountains. The snowman no longer appears, but the trail is marked with signs honoring the lost souls who once wandered, seeking peace in the silent embrace of the wilderness. Mount Rainier remains a place of awe and mystery, its peaks standing tall against the test of time. My encounter with the snowman taught me the importance of empathy and the enduring power of memory. The wilderness holds more than just beauty and serenity. It harbors the echoes of lives once lived, their stories woven into the fabric of the mountains, waiting to be heard and remembered. If you ever find yourself trekking through the Cascade Range on a harsh winter night, remember the tale of the snowman who guides lost souls to safety. Approach with respect and understanding, For the spirits that linger still are not just figments of imagination but echoes of lives once lived, yearning to share their stories and find the peace they so desperately seek. Story number 6. The Shadow in Olympic Forest. I've always been drawn to the solitude that only the wilderness can offer. The Olympic Forest, with its dense canopy and untouched snowscapes, was my sanctuary from the cacophony of city life. My friend, Jake, and I had been planning this hunting trip for months, eager to escape the relentless pace of our everyday routines. Winter in the Pacific Northwest has its own charm: silent nights, the crunch of snow underfoot, and the crisp, invigorating air that fills your lungs with every breath. We arrived on a frigid Saturday morning, the sky a blanket of gray that threatened snow. Our trucks were loaded with gear, rifles, camping equipment, ample supplies to last us the weekend. Setting up camp wasn't too arduous. We found a secluded spot deep within the forest, surrounded by towering evergreens heavy with snow. The isolation was exactly what we needed. As the day progressed, we ventured out, tracking signs of deer and enjoying the peacefulness that only nature can provide. The sun dipped below the horizon faster than usual, cloaking the forest in darkness. We returned to camp, the flickering light of our lantern casting long shadows on the snow-covered ground. After dinner, we settled into our tents, the warmth of the sleeping bags contrasting sharply with the biting cold outside. The wind howled through the trees, a mournful sound that seemed to echo our own exhaustion. Just as we were drifting into sleep, a sound shattered the stillness, a heavy, deliberate thudding that seemed to circle our campsite. "Jake, did you hear that?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. He nodded, eyes wide with alertness. "Yeah, sounds like footsteps, probably just a bear or something. Let's stay calm." We listened intently, the footsteps growing louder, closer. My mind raced with possibilities: wildlife, other hunters, or something else entirely. The thudding stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that felt unnatural. Gathering our courage, we decided to investigate. Bundling up, we approached the edge of our tent, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The snow glistened under the beam of light, revealing tracks that weren't our own: large, deep impressions that led into the surrounding woods and then abruptly stopped. "Maybe it got scared off," Jake suggested, trying to mask his unease. Before I could respond, the sound returned, this time accompanied by a low, guttural growl that resonated through the trees. My blood ran cold as a massive silhouette emerged from the shadows, a hulking figure covered in thick, matted fur. Its eyes glowed an unnatural red, piercing through the darkness with a malevolent intensity. I froze, unable to move, as the creature stood motionless for what felt like an eternity. Its gaze locked onto ours. Jake and I exchanged terrified glances, the realization dawning on us that this was no ordinary animal. "Jake, we need to leave. Now," I stammered, my voice barely audible over the creature's low growl. He grabbed my arm, pulling me back towards the tent. "Agreed. Let's go." We turned and sprinted back to our campsite, the creature's presence a heavy weight pressing down on us. As we reached the safety of our tents, the growling ceased abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence. Our breaths came in ragged gasps, hearts hammering in our chests as we huddled together, the terror of the encounter overwhelming us. The rest of the night passed in a restless haze, sleep eluding us as we lay in our tents, minds replaying the horrifying image of the red-eyed creature. Dawn broke slowly, the forest bathed in a pale, wintry light that did little to dispel the lingering fear. Determined to understand what we had witnessed, Jake and I spent the morning scouring our campsite for any clues. We found the large, bloody footprints leading away from our tent, a stark reminder of the night's events. Exhausted but resolute, we decided to leave, eager to put the terrifying encounter behind us. As we packed up, Jake pulled out his phone, dialing the local ranger station to report the incident. The operator's voice was calm, but the skepticism in her tone was palpable. A large, possibly aggressive animal? Are you sure? The forest is vast, and sightings like that are extremely rare. We saw something not normal, I insisted, struggling to find the right words. It had red eyes and covered itself in fur. We're not sure what it was, but it wasn't any known wildlife. The operator sighed softly. I understand your concern. We'll send someone out to investigate, but I can't promise anything. Please stay on the main roads and avoid venturing back into the forest alone. Reluctantly, we agreed, the weight of our experience pressing heavily on us. As we drove away, the memory of the creature's glowing red eyes lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between our world and something far darker. Over the next few days, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Strange noises echoed through our homes, and shadows seemed to flicker just beyond our vision. Our friends and families listened with skepticism as we recounted our story, the logical minds dismissing it as an overactive imagination or the stress of the hunt. But Jake and I knew what we had seen. Determined to find answers, we delved into local folklore, uncovering tales of spirits and creatures that roamed the Olympic forest, remnants of ancient legends and tragedies long forgotten. One story stood out, a tale of a guardian spirit, corrupted by years of isolation and pain, now seeking vengeance on those who dared to intrude upon its domain. Armed with this knowledge, we felt a sense of responsibility to respect the forest and its dark secrets. We reached out to local historians and park rangers, sharing our experience in hopes of preventing others from encountering the same terrifying fate. Months passed, and while the memory of that night never fully faded, the forest seemed to quiet, the oppressive presence diminishing as if our efforts had brought some measure of peace. Yet, every now and then, drivers on the outskirts of Olympic Forest would report sightings of a tall, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes, a chilling reminder of the night Jake and I faced the darkness that lurked within the trees. One winter evening, years after our harrowing encounter, I found myself driving alone down the same stretch of Route 87. The snow gently falling around me, the road was quiet, the world wrapped in a serene blanket of white. As I approached mile marker 47, memories of that night resurfaced, the fear and awe intertwining with the tranquility of the winter landscape. Just as I began to relax, a figure emerged from the fog, a young woman, dressed in a flowing white dress, her presence ethereal against the snow-covered backdrop. She stood by the roadside, her gaze fixed on me with a sorrowful intensity. I slowed down, my heart pounding, recognizing the same haunting eyes that had once terrorized me. Do you need a ride somewhere? I asked cautiously, recalling the lessons learned from that night. She nodded silently, stepping forward with a grace that belied the fear that gripped me. As she climbed into the truck, I couldn't help but notice the faint scent of rain and earth that surrounded her, a comforting contrast to the cold, oppressive presence of the creature from years past. As we drove through the silent night, she began to speak, her voice soft and filled with a longing that resonated deep within me. Thank you for helping me find peace, she whispered, her eyes no longer filled with fear but with gratitude. We reached her destination, a small, secluded cabin nestled within the forest. She turned to face me, a serene smile gracing her lips. Take care of yourself, she said, her voice fading as she stepped out of the truck and into the snow. I watched as she walked away, her figure disappearing into the night, leaving behind only the peaceful silence of the winter forest. As I drove away, a sense of closure settled over me, the memory of the creature's red eyes finally giving way to the comforting presence of a spirit at peace. The Olympic forest remains a place of beauty and mystery, its silent trees holding secrets that only the brave or the foolish dare to uncover. My encounter with the shadowy guardian taught me the importance of respect and understanding, the thin line between our world and the supernatural realms that lie just beyond our perception. If you ever find yourself venturing into the heart of Olympic Forest on a cold winter night, Remember the tale of the hunters and the shadow with red eyes. Approach with respect and empathy. For the spirits that dwell within are not just figments of imagination but echoes of lives once lived, yearning to be heard and remembered. Story number 7. Echoes from the Summit. I've always been drawn to mountains, their silent majesty, the way they dominate the landscape, and the sense of isolation they offer. Mount Rainier, with its towering peak cloaked in snow and ice, was no exception. As an avid climber and freelance writer, I sought both adventure and inspiration in its rugged terrains. This winter, I decided to join a group of fellow enthusiasts for a weekend ascent, hoping to capture the essence of Rainier's winter solitude. Our group consisted of 5 seasoned climbers: Mike, our leader, whose experience was unmatched; Sarah, a geologist with a keen eye for detail; Tom, an avid photographer always ready to capture the perfect shot; Lisa, a wildlife biologist fascinated by alpine ecosystems; and me, Ben, the chronicler eager to document our journey. We set up camp on Friday evening, the sky a canvas of deep purples and blues as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was crisp, the scent of pine mingling with the earthy aroma of the forest floor. As night settled, we huddled around a small fire, sharing stories and plans for the ascent the following day. Mike outlined our route, emphasizing the importance of staying together and being prepared for the harsh winter conditions. We listened intently, the flickering flames casting long shadows on our faces. Exhausted yet excited, we retired to our tents, the sounds of the forest lulling us into a restless sleep. Saturday morning greeted us with a blanket of fresh snow. The landscape transformed into a pristine, white expanse. The climb was challenging but exhilarating, the crisp air invigorating our spirits as we navigated the treacherous slopes. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, casting a brilliant light on the glistening snow. By late afternoon, we reached a precarious ledge overlooking a deep crevasse. The view was breathtaking, the vastness of Mount Rainier stretching out before us, its peaks piercing the sky. We took a moment to rest, our breaths visible in the cold air, enjoying the serene beauty surrounding us. That's when it happened. A low, guttural growl echoed through the silence, reverberating off the icy walls. It was an unsettling sound, one that didn't belong to any known wildlife in the area. We exchanged nervous glances, the growl repeating itself, growing louder and more menacing. "Did you hear that?" Lisa whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Mike nodded cautiously. "Stay calm. It's probably just an animal. But we need to be prepared." We strained our ears, trying to locate the source of the sound. The forest around us seemed to close in, the shadows deepening as the day transitioned into dusk. The temperature dropped sharply, the wind picking up, carrying with it an icy chill that cut through our layers. Tom, ever the photographer, raised his camera, hoping to capture the elusive creature that had disturbed our tranquility. "Maybe it's a mountain lion or a wolf," he suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. As the sun began to set, the growls intensified, morphing into eerie, almost human-like moans. The moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting a pale light that made the snow shimmer with an otherworldly glow. We decided to push forward, our determination outweighing the growing unease. Halfway up the mountain, we stumbled upon a clearing illuminated by moonlight. There, standing at the center, was a towering figure clad in tattered garments, its eyes glowing a fierce red that seemed to pierce the darkness. The creature was enormous, its presence both terrifying and awe-inspiring, blending seamlessly with the snowy surroundings despite its otherworldly appearance. Mike took a step forward, his voice steady. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure remained silent, his glowing eyes fixed on us. A sudden gust of wind howled through the clearing, carrying with it the scent of something foul, decay and earth. The temperature plummeted further, our breaths turning to frost as fear began to take hold. Without warning, the creature lunged forward, its massive form moving with unnatural speed. We scrambled to retreat, the ground beneath us crumbling as we desperately tried to escape. The growls turned into blood-curdling screams, echoing through the forest like the cries of the damned. We raced back down the mountain, the darkness now a living entity pressing in on us from all sides. The creature's presence seemed to follow, its red eyes glowing menacingly in the distance, watching our every move. The footprints it left behind were enormous, clawed impressions that sank deep into the snow, a haunting reminder of its terrifying encounter. As we reached our base camp, the storm broke, unleashing a torrent of rain and snow that obscured our path. Exhausted and shaken, we huddled together, the memory of the red-eyed figure etched into our minds. The fire's warmth was a small comfort against the lingering fear, but the sense of being watched never fully dissipated. That night, as I lay in my tent, the sounds of the storm outside were drowned out by the echoes of that night's horrors. The growls, the screams, the unrelenting presence of the creature haunted my dreams, the line between reality and nightmare blurring in the cold, dark hours of the night. Weeks later, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us back from the mountain. Strange noises plagued my nights, whispers carried by the wind, shadows moving just beyond the corner of my vision. I became obsessed with the encounter, digging deeper into the lore of Mount Rainier, uncovering stories of ancient spirits and forgotten tragedies that spoke of restless souls forever bound to the mountain's icy embrace. One evening, driven by a need for closure, I returned to the base camp alone, the memory of the creature's red eyes burning in my mind. The snow had receded, leaving behind a landscape of quiet stillness, the mountain standing tall and imposing against the night sky. I set up a small altar, placing a candle and some offerings, items that symbolized our respect and acknowledgement of the mountain's dark secrets. As the candle flickered, casting long shadows on the snow, I felt a presence beside me. Turning slowly, I saw the figure once more, its red eyes softening, the fierce glow fading into a gentle warmth. It stood there, no longer a menacing beast but a sorrowful spirit seeking understanding. "You came back," it whispered, the voice echoing like the wind through the pines. "You remembered us." I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want to help you find peace." The spirit reached out, its form shimmering like the aurora, the icy chill replaced by a soothing warmth. "Thank you," it whispered, its eyes now filled with gratitude rather than rage. "Remember our stories. Keep our memories alive." With that, the spirit began to fade, its presence dissolving into the night as the first light of dawn broke over Mount Rainier. The oppressive darkness lifted, leaving behind a sense of calm and closure that had eluded us all night. Driving away from the base camp that morning, the mountain stood serene and majestic, the horrors of the night now a part of its enduring legacy. The footprints we had left behind were gone, erased by the snow's gentle embrace, a testament to the power of remembrance and respect. Mount Rainier remains a place of legend and mystery, its silent peaks holding the memories of those who have walked its trails. My encounter taught me that some mountains are more than just natural wonders. They are sentient entities, guardians of ancient secrets and restless spirits yearning for peace. If you ever find yourself climbing Mount Rainier on a cold winter night, remember the tales of the red-eyed spirit. Approach with respect and empathy, for the mountain's whispers are not just echoes of the past but pleas for remembrance and understanding. The line between the living and the dead is thin here, and sometimes, all it takes to bridge the gap is a moment of compassion and a willingness to listen.